Anthony and Michael Carpio sat expressionless in court today while Judge Martin Herskovitz prepared to sentence them. Before sentence was pronounced, prosecutor Scott Marcus read an impact statement written by the victim's family.
Gang members were sentenced today for killing a teenager on a high school campus in the Valley. CBS 2's Randy Page shows us
all he was doing.
The judge then sentenced the two brothers to 16 years to life. The Carpio brothers will not be eligible for parole until the year 2028.
Forward to possible grandchildren. The last thought we would ever have is that we'll have to plan their funeral.
By then, both of them will be in their early 30s. In Van Nuys, Randy Page, CBS 2 News.
Procedural background. Anthony and Michael were involved in a gang challenge at Cleveland High School in Reseda, California. They confronted Kevin Oriana, who was associated with a rival street gang. Michael threw a punch, and Anthony joined in a three-way fistfight. Oriana fought back, taking on both brothers for a time. As Oriana fought back, Anthony pulled a knife and knifed Oriana 10 times in the head, neck, and left and right torso. As the brothers fled, Anthony dropped the knife, Michael cleaned it off, and tossed it away before they drove off. The people charged both brothers with first-degree slaying, alleged that the slaying was committed for the benefit of, at the direction of, and in association with a criminal street gang, and that Anthony personally used a deadly and dangerous weapon.
Anthony and Michael Carpio sat expressionless in court today while Judge Martin Herskovitz prepared to sentence them. Judge Herskovitz said Kevin Oriana was playing handball at the high school when the two gang members accosted him.
Forward to possible grandchildren. The last thought we would ever have is that we'll have to plan their funeral.
The trial court instructed the jury on lesser offenses to first-degree slaying, such as second-degree slaying, voluntary manslaughter based on heat of passion, and voluntary manslaughter based on imperfect self-defense. The jury convicted each brother of second-degree slaying, finding the gang and weapon use enhancements to be true. Evidentiary issues. The case revolves around the testimony of a gang expert in a criminal case involving the Rockwood criminal street gang. The expert testified about gang culture, stating that gang members often confront each other and resort to violence if they're from another gang. This is done to protect the gang's territory and make community members and rival gang members fear and respect the gang. The expert testified about the Rockwood gang, which is approximately 200 members and controls an area just west of downtown Los Angeles. Its primary activities include vandalism, robbery, attack with a deadly weapon, weapons charge, narcotics charges, and attempted slaying. The prosecution introduced certified court records as to two known Rockwood gang members, Richard Alvarez and Rodrigo Bernal. The expert concluded that Michael and Anthony were both members of the Rockwood gang based on various factors such as past conversations, tattoos, and a notebook seized from both brothers when they were arrested. After the prosecutor presented a hypothetical matching the facts of this case, the expert opined that the brothers' confrontation, fight, and knifing of Oriana benefited and was in association with the Rockwood street gang. Until recently, an expert could testify about any out-of-court statements that form the basis for their opinion without having to satisfy either the hearsay rule or the confrontation clause. However, the Supreme Court's recent decision on Sanchez overruled this earlier precedent and reinstituted a distinction that the out-of-court statements an expert relies upon as the basis for their opinion are not admitted for their truth. Sanchez limits an expert's ability to testify to the basis of their opinion when it comes from case-specific out-of-court statements and facts of which they have no personal knowledge and relate to the particular events and participants alleged to have been involved in the case being tried.
Before sentence was pronounced, prosecutor Scott Marcus read an impact statement written by the victim's family, while Judge Herskovitz watched photos provided by Oriana's parents.
As a parent, we plan to dance at their wedding.
gang members were sentenced today for killing a teenager on a high school campus in the Valley. CBS 2's Randy Page shows us.
The brothers argue that the expert's testimony violated Sanchez because the expert testified about gang membership, gang culture, and the escalation of confrontations between rival gang members. They also argue that the Second Circuit's decision in United States v. Mejia prohibits an expert from providing testimony about gang culture or opening on case-specific facts when it's likely derived from out-of-court conversations with others. The brothers' arguments are without merit, as Sanchez perceives an expert's ability to explain the basis for their opinion when the basis is the generalized knowledge in their area of expertise. Sanchez's limitation of case-specific facts to those relating to the particular events and participants alleged to have been involved in the case being tried means that facts regarding the gang affiliation of Alvarez and Bernal were not case-specific facts and fall on the side of Sanchez's redrawn line that doesn't require compliance with the confrontation clause or the hearsay rule. However, the brothers are correct that the people may have violated Sanchez when the expert testified to the content of the FI cards regarding the brothers' gang membership. The expert testified to case-specific out-of-court statements of which he had no personal knowledge of. The error must be assessed whether the people established a relevant hearsay exception and whether those statements are non-testimonial within the meaning of Crawford. In this case, the gang enhancement overwhelmingly applies to Anthony because he committed to the slaying with a Rockwood gang member, Michael. Sanchez's limitation of case-specific facts to those relating to the particular events and participants alleged to have been involved in the case being tried means that facts regarding the gang affiliation of Alvarez and Bernal were not case-specific facts and fall on the side of Sanchez's redrawn line that doesn't require compliance with the confrontation clause or the hearsay rule. Sufficiency of the evidence. Michael challenges the sufficiency of evidence supporting a second-degree slaying conviction. The jury was instructed to find Michael liable for Oriana's demise on two theories. 1. Michael aided and abetted Anthony's commission of the second-degree slaying, or 2. Michael aided and abetted the battery of Oriana, and second-degree slaying was a natural and probable consequence of that battery. Slaying is the unlawful slaying of a human being with malice afterthought. There are 2 degrees of slaying, first degree and second degree. A person is liable for a crime if they commit the crime themselves or if they aid and abet another in its commission. There is sufficient evidence upon which a national jury could conclude that Michael aided and abetted Anthony in committing the second-degree slaying of Oriana.
All he was doing.
The judge then sentenced the two brothers to 16 years to life. Victim, 18-year-old Kevin Oriana, was stabbed to death on April 24, 2013. By then, both of them will be in their early 30s. In Van Nuys, Randy Page, CBS 2 News.
Michael admitted in his post-arrest interview that he didn't allow Anthony to carry a knife in his car, which indicates Michael's awareness that Anthony sometimes carried a knife. Michael raises 2 arguments in response. First, he asserts that there was no direct evidence that he knew Anthony had a knife. However, the jury also knew that Michael was lying to the police when he denied knowing about the knife. Second, Michael points to the evidence that he called Anthony a stupid folk and said, "Dick, I think you planned it," during their accidentally recorded conversation in the minivan. Michael aided and abetted a battery, leading to second-degree slaying conviction. An aider and abettor are guilty of any other crime the perpetrator commits that is a natural and probable consequence of the intended crime. To attach criminal liability for a further crime beyond the intended crime, the people must prove 1. That the defendant aided and abetted the intended crime, and 2. The further crime was a natural and probable consequence of the intended crime. Courts have held that a reasonable person would foresee that slaying is a natural and probable consequence of an assault with a deadly weapon or gang-related assault or fistfight. Michael's argument that there was no evidence that he knew Anthony was carrying a knife in advance fails factually and legally. The Supreme Court held that it wasn't necessary for there to have been a prior discussion of or agreement to a shooting, or for a gang member to have known a fellow gang member was in fact armed.
The Carpio brothers will not be eligible for parole until the year 2028, after they were found guilty of second-degree murder, when he was confronted by the 2 gang members on the grounds of Cleveland High School in Reseda. By then, both of them will be in their early 30s.
Michael's liability for Oriana's slaying rests on more than Michael's gang membership alone. It rests on his knowledge that Anthony sometimes carried a knife, Michael's confrontation of Oriana and a subsequent fistfight, Michael's distraction of Oriana during the fight, and Michael's attempts to conceal evidence by wiping the knife clean. Slaying cannot be a natural and probable consequence of a mere misdemeanor like battery. More recent cases have refused to give dispositive weight to whether the intended crime is labeled a felony or misdemeanor, as long as the further crime is a reasonably foreseeable consequence of the intended crime. Instructional errors. The brothers in this case argued that the trial court committed two instructional errors. One, it didn't instruct the jury on the crime of involuntary manslaughter as a lesser included offense to slaying, and two, it misled the jury into believing that imperfect self-defense was unavailable if either brother escalated the fistfight into a fight with a dangerous or deadly weapon. Involuntary manslaughter is defined as an unlawful slaying committed without due caution and circumspection during the commission of an unlawful act, a misdemeanor, an inherently dangerous felony, or an inherently dangerous assaultive felony. The trial court was required to instruct the jury on involuntary manslaughter based on whether there was substantial evidence that the slaying of Oriana was the product of criminal negligence, but not the product of express or implied malice. Michael argues that the trial court should focus on whether the homicide was the product of criminal negligence or malice. The trial court was required to instruct the jury on involuntary manslaughter based on whether there was substantial evidence that the slaying of Oriana was the product of criminal negligence, but not the product of express or implied malice. Michael argues that the trial court should focus on whether the homicide was the product of criminal negligence or malice. The brothers argue that the trial court's decision to give CalJIC number 5.31 was reversible error due to two reasons. First, courts aren't supposed to mix CalCrim and CalJIC instructions, and second, dropping CalJIC number 5.31 into the predominantly CalCrim-based instructions on perfect self-defense misled the jury into believing that it couldn't apply the doctrine of imperfect self-defense if a person used a deadly weapon in response to an attack with the fists. Final announcement. The judgments of Anthony and Michael are affirmed. Anthony Carpio, 18, was sentenced to 16 years to life, and Michael Stephen Carpio, 20, was sentenced to 15 years to life, Los Angeles County Deputy District Attorney Scott Marcus said. Well guys, that's gonna do it for this video. See you next time.